My name is Anna Keller. I am an investigative journalist. I follow evidence. This is Evidence Log 08. The evidence in this log is about a number, 95%. That is the confidence interval attached to the 1988 carbon dating of the Shroud of Turin. 3 laboratories, 1 result, medieval origin, 1260 to 1390 AD. Case closed. Except for what happened when someone finally looked at the actual numbers. For decades, the raw measurements from the 3 laboratories were not publicly available. In 2017, a researcher named Tristan Casabianca formally requested them. In 2019, his analysis was published in one of the leading peer-reviewed journals in archaeological science. His conclusion was specific. The reported 95% confidence interval may not accurately describe the data that was actually produced. Here is why that matters. When you test multiple portions of a uniform sample in 3 laboratories, the results should agree in a predictable statistical pattern. When they do not, when the variation exceeds what measurement error would predict, it is called statistical inconsistency. Casabianca found statistical inconsistency in the Shroud measurements, not in the control samples, in the Shroud data specifically. In 2020, a second independent analysis by statistician Brian Walsh and STIRP team member Larry Schwalbe reached the same conclusion. Neither paper says the result was wrong. Both papers say the statistical method used to report it overstated the precision of the conclusion. There is a difference between those two things. The sample itself raises a further question. It was cut from one location, the bottom left corner of the Shroud. One strip divided into 3 portions. In effect, one sample from one place. Raymond Rogers, a chemist and STIRP team member, published a peer-reviewed paper in 2005, reporting that threads from that area contained cotton fibers not present in the main body of the cloth. They also showed a surface coating consistent with a dyeing process. The main body of the cloth had neither. His interpretation was that the sample area may have included material from a medieval repair, thread added later and dyed to match the original. If so, the carbon date reflects the repair, not the cloth. His methodology has been contested. What is on the record is that the area sampled in 1988 is chemically distinct from the main body of the cloth. Now, here's the statement that changes the shape of everything. In March 2016, the BBC broadcast an interview with Michael Tite, the scientist from the British Museum who coordinated the 1988 carbon dating. Speaking on record nearly 30 years later, he said 2 things. He said there is no real evidence for paint, meaning the image was not produced by an artist. And he said it is highly probable there was a body in the cloth. He then proposed the body may have been a medieval crucifixion victim, someone crucified during the Crusades as an act of humiliation. A 2025 peer-reviewed paper examines this proposal and identifies 3 specific difficulties. 1. The torturers would have needed detailed knowledge of every element of the passion. The crown of thorns as a cap, not a ring. The nails through the wrists, not the palms. The scourge wounds on the front as well as the back. These are details traditional Christian iconography gets wrong. The Shroud gets them right, too. Roman crucifixion technique was not in general use in the medieval period. Expertise in its specific mechanics has no documented parallel. 3. Having performed this act as humiliation, the torturers would then have given the body a respectful burial consistent with first-century Jewish practice. That is not what humiliation looks like. There is a 4th difficulty the 2025 paper does not raise. Jewish law makes a categorical distinction between natural and violent death. Under halacha, the body of Jewish legal tradition, the blood shed at the moment of violent death must be buried with the body. It cannot be cleaned away. Garments soaked in blood, the earth around the body, all of it interred together. This is not a minor custom. It is a core legal requirement specific to violent death. The blood on the Shroud was not cleaned away before the body was wrapped. The wounds were preserved intact in the linen. This is precisely what halakha requires. A Crusades-era torturer would not have known this requirement. A medieval European forger would almost certainly not have known it. It does not appear in mainstream Christian understanding of Jewish practice. It surfaces only in the Talmudic sources. The Gospel accounts add one further element. The burial was rushed. Late on Friday afternoon, with the Sabbath beginning at sundown, there was no time to complete the preparation. The anointing with spices had not been performed. The women returned on Sunday morning to finish what had not been done. A forger creating a burial cloth would have created the cloth of a completed burial. The absence of the spices is not a gap in the evidence. It is the evidence. A forger who knew enough to replicate first-century Jewish burial law for violent death, and who also knew to leave the burial incomplete in the specific way the Gospels describe. Would be a forger who knew more about first-century Judaism than most first-century Jews. The evidence does not support that forger. It supports a body. The man who ran the 1988 carbon dating says there was probably a real body in the cloth. His dating result says the cloth is medieval. Both statements are on the record. The tension between them has not been resolved. The next log examines what the 2022 University of Padua study found when it dated the shroud, using a method that has nothing to do with carbon isotopes at all. A physical measurement of cellulose degradation. An entirely independent line of evidence. The result was not medieval. Chain of custody, intact to this point. The search continues. Pay attention to what the numbers actually say. The work behind these logs lives at searchandakeller.substack.com. The primary sources, the documented chain, the arguments in full. If you found something here that did not fit the narrative you were given, there is more where that came from. Subscribe and follow the investigation as it develops. The search continues there too.